see?
Somebody said that there's a guy on here saying they ain't seen the prints yet.
What's that? What's that?
Bigfoot sightings rarely leave clear answers, only shadows, strange knocks, and tracks, too large to explain. From a hidden figure near Shaver Lake to a strange face in the snow, what are people really seeing in these forests? In 2024, a hiker headed down a secluded trail through the California foothills near Shaver Lake. The ground was wet from recent rain, and sunlight pushed through the tree canopy in long, thin beams. He spent the afternoon fishing with his guard completely down. At one point, he leaned his catch against a nearby rock and took a quick photo, nothing planned, just a casual picture. That evening back at home and looking through his photos under better light, something stopped him cold. Deep in the tree line behind where he had been standing, barely visible but unmistakably upright, was a figure. It was positioned inside natural cover, completely still about 40 yards away. Some analysts who examined the image described his posture as consistent with a female primate carrying an infant on one hip. Others argued it was only overlapping branches and shadows creating an illusion, but the part nobody disagreed on was the implication. He never returned to that trail. Something that remains hidden instead of running suggests it felt no threat or was evaluating. We still don't know what it was. Do you think it was watching out of curiosity or something else? Two hunters were filming in the remote wilderness of Idaho when they suddenly stopped, as if they had just noticed something that should not have been there. They quickly pointed their cameras toward the forest ahead, not because they had clearly seen it, but because whatever had just crossed the frame had such an unusual shape that they could not ignore it.
Give me the camera. Oh.
That wasn't a freaking bear.
What was that?
It wasn't a bear.
Oh my god. Listen. Shh. Listen.
Did you get it?
I don't even know what that was.
Did you get it on film?
Yeah. I know I got it on film before you took the camera away from me.
It didn't stay still, and it did not remain visible for long. It only appeared for a moment between the trees before disappearing, but the way it moved was unlike a normal run or walk, making it impossible for them to identify it as any familiar animal. To this day, there is still no clear explanation for what appeared in the footage, and no one truly knows what they saw. Maybe it was only there for a second, but something about the way it moved in that wilderness did not feel normal. So, what do you think it really was? In 2022, a family hiking near a remote waterfall stopped to rest at the base and take in the cold spray. They were filming casually when something appeared in the background of their video. Through the falling curtain of water, a silhouette moved along the ridge above them, hunched forward, walking steadily on two legs, with a torso much too wide for any hiker carrying a backpack. They didn't notice it until later. By the time they stopped recording and gathered their things, the figure had already vanished beyond the ridgeline. Skeptics suggested it was a large hiker with equipment, but frame-by-frame analysis showed a shape with proportions beyond any reasonable human outline. Whatever it was had been crossing the ridge directly above the family the entire time they rested below, fully exposed and completely unaware that anything was watching. The width of that silhouette is hard to explain away, with only a backpack. Some shapes simply do not match what we know. What do you think was moving along that ridge? Meet Sarah, the creator behind Sasquatch, a channel focused on sharing evidence and first-hand Bigfoot encounters. In her videos, she travels through the thick forests of Washington state, documenting strange sounds, unexplained footprints, and unsettling sightings.
My heart was pounding like really bad, and I didn't know what was going on. Footsteps, crack, as it was passing trees.
A mini bike ride through Morton with her guide Stephen Marcus would soon remind her that in these woods, no one is ever truly alone.
Welcome to Salish Sasquatch, where we share evidence as well as encounters. This area is very well known in the Bigfoot community in Washington State for Sasquatch activity. I'm going to link that down below. That's a very well-known account about two people that were hired to, and they had a lot of activity transpire. So I'm going to link that below. Steve and Marcus today, and we are going to take you along for the ride and tell you about an encounter that happened in March of 2022.
Morton, Washington is widely known within the Bigfoot research community as a place with significant Sasquatch activity. The channel had previously shared a well-known account called The Night Watchman, a documented report involving two people hired to guard logging equipment on a nearby hill, where a series of unusual events took place. That video is linked for reference. Today, Stephen Marcus joins as a guide for a ride into the area connected to an encounter from March of 2022. On March 26th, Jonathan and around a dozen friends gathered for a night at an old quarry. Two trailers sat quietly in the dark, while a fire cast moving shadows across the clearing. The group settled in, talking and laughing, with no reason to expect anything strange.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll go along with it. We'll see what's happening here. But at the same time, some of these guys were track specialists who follow footprints and the sounds and all the different things, all these different experts at their fields out here.
But one camper, sitting slightly away from the others, was about to witness something the night had been quietly holding back. Without warning, a sharp clatter cut across the road. Jonathan and a companion heard it immediately, a sound that never reached the rest of the group, blocked as they were by the trailer. Not long after, word came over the radio that at least two Sasquatches had been seen down by the creek.
After the gentleman that I was sitting by, that it made me aware of the rock clacking, and then he radios over and he goes, "There's at least two Sasquatches down by the creek." And so I'm scurrying to go get my phone, and when I start walking down the road right here, that's when there's these two power knocks. It sounded like two gunshots, but it wasn't gunshots, it was just...
The group rushed for gear and phones. Then came two knocks, huge concussive, carrying through the darkness like gunshots, but clearly something else. For several tense minutes, the knocking moved through the trees, deliberate and measured, as if something hidden was making itself known on its own terms. Then came movement. One of Jonathan's companions froze as a wave of fear moved through the group.
So I'm not 100% positive where the Sasquatch was last seen, and from the version that I had heard was that when the guy was like, "Oh, I'm gonna run after him and try to film him," and I was also told by some of the guys that were watching the monitor, the guy who's chasing him, he's falling all over the place. They could see that through thermal.
No one was sure where to look or which direction to move. The possibility that something massive and unseen was out there watching closing in hung over everyone.
Crawling, and I could see him, I could see the fern starting to move, and he's starting to come down, and he's starting to go back this direction. As he's coming by, I see the guy who was first chasing the Bigfoot, and I told him, I said, "Hey, he's moving right up there." And he goes, "Yeah, okay, sure." And I thought, okay, well, I don't know who these guys are anyway, so whatever.
Footage captured from above eventually showed a figure beside a tree. Only part of it was visible, the left side and part of the back exposed at a slight angle. One arm hung in an unusual position, bent and heavy. The torso was broad and powerfully built.
I see it's going down this direction, and it's only about, as I'm coming up this way, I see Steve walking down, and it's coming across right by Steve. I know, I can't believe we saw that. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe we both saw this thing. And we were just all excited because we didn't know what to do at that point. Then we went back into camp.
With proportions unlike anything else in the frame. It occupied the space beside the tree like a solid, immovable object, towering dense and completely out of scale with its surroundings. For the witness, it was a first encounter, disorienting, impossible to dismiss, and impossible to forget. Just after dawn the next morning, he was pulled from sleep by a rapid series of sharp cracking sounds, moving through the trees. Faint at first, they quickly multiplied and seemed to come from several directions at once, forming what felt like a triangle of sound, closing in around the camp.
And I was so excited. This was my very first experience and introduction to collecting audio for Sasquatch. And everyone was telling me you have to use it. So I finally used it. I turned it on, went to bed around 2 o'clock in the morning. About 6:30, I think, in the morning, I got woken up and I started hearing something cracking on a tree.
An audio recorder left running in the tent captured fragments of it. The sounds were faint on playback, but in the moment they were loud, close, and unlike anything he had heard in years spent in the woods.
As I'm laying there in my sleeping bag, I can hear sounds going off behind me towards the direction of my feet, that way in the woods, and then over to the right. It was like a perfect triangle. Fortunately, I caught this all on my audio. It's not great, but it's there, and you can kind of hear it. Marcus is sleeping. He finally wakes up, and I'm like thinking I'm the only one hearing this.
After everything that happened over those hours, the knocks, the figure in the thermal footage, the sounds at dawn, one question stayed with everyone who was there. How close did they actually come to something most people will never encounter at all? Something that announces itself with knocking, allows itself to be partly seen, then disappears before anyone can get close. That pattern appears across many accounts. It raises questions about intent that do not have easy answers. What do you think it was doing out there that night? Warning them or something else? 2 elk hunters were driving through a snowy forest road toward their usual hunting area when they saw a tall, dark figure moving along the roadside. It was visible for only a moment. Before they could understand what they were seeing, the figure turned and vanished into the thick brush beside the trees.
Right on the side of the road there. Nice. I bet we might see some. They were here earlier today. What's that? What's that? Oh my God. What was that? Get out of here. Holy shit.
The hunters tried to get a better look, but it was already gone, swallowed by the snowy forest, without leaving any trace. A tall, upright figure that disappears that quickly into dense brush does not leave much to work with. What do you think they saw on that road? One of the world's most respected naturalists turned his focus to the mystery of the Yeti, a creature long believed to live in the Himalayan mountains. He examined whether ancient animals like Gigantopithecus could be the source behind the legend, with stories of enormous ape-like beings passed down through generations in the region. The naturalist presented 2 pieces of evidence suggesting that something in these mountains remains unexplained.
There is a real possibility that there might be something in the abominable snowman mystery. There is a famous photograph of a footprint, a very big footprint, in the snow that was taken, I think, at 18,000 feet or something in the Himalayas on a snowfield in the 30s by a famous mountaineer called Eric Shipton. People are suggesting that maybe it was a folk, but nonetheless there was a trail of these prints which went right across the snowfield and disappeared onto rocks on the other side. And I don't think you make all those jokes at 18,000 feet, but perhaps even more intriguing and certainly more reliable is that in the 30s there was a German called von Königswald, and he went into a Chinese chemist, apothecary's shop, and there are all sorts of traditional medicines kept in those shops, and among them were some fossil teeth or subfossil teeth, and amongst those were huge molars about that size, about 4 or 5 times the size of our molar. I mean, it had to be the molar of a giant ape. And he got about 4 or 5 of them, but the search then went on for a number of years, and eventually they found a bit of a jaw, just this lower part here, which had these teeth in, of a giant ape that would stand, if it was blown up in proportion, something like 10 feet to 12 feet tall. Immense, yeah. You know? So one did exist. I mean, people here, I dare say, have walked in the Himalayas. If you have, you know that the distances are immense. And you know, too, there's an animal that lives there will be well aware of your presence before you know where it is, and that it may keep out of the way. So there are persistent legends up amongst the Sherpas, like in the high mountains in the Himalayas, and I just have a suspicion there certainly was one, a giant ape there, and I think it's not impossible that one will survive.
So the Yeti could be hiding out somewhere?
Yeah.
Whether something descended from that ancient ape still moves through those mountains is a question that has never been fully answered and continues to interest scientists and explorers alike. A creature that large in terrain That vast avoiding human contact for centuries is not as far-fetched as it may seem. Do you think something is still out there in those mountains, or did it disappear long before we started looking? Two friends were exploring a swampy area when they saw a dark figure watching them from the tree line. They began recording. The shape moved in and out from behind a large tree, appearing for a moment, then pulling back into the thick brush. It repeated this several times. Whatever it was, it stayed hidden and continued watching. The two never got a clear view. They left the area confused and unsettled, with no explanation for what had been silently observing them from the swamp. Something that stays hidden but keeps watching behaves differently from most animals. What do you think was out there in those trees? A homeowner in Tennessee set up a camera to record sounds coming from the woods behind his property. He'd spent time backpacking in the Appalachians and was already familiar with reports of strange sounds from the region. What he captured that night was unlike anything he had heard before. The recording picked up knocking from the tree-line coyotes and what sounded like a distressed raccoon. Around 28 seconds, the knocking became stronger. Then, at 1:14, a deep growl came through something he had no category for. In person, the knocking had sounded like chains hitting trees or wood snapping, but with a strangely organic quality his phone could not fully capture. About a month earlier, he had seen red orbs near the tree line, but he made no firm claims about any of it. Whatever was out there that night left him shaken enough to share the footage. Some sounds recorded near rural woodlines do not match any known animal, and when knocking, growling, and strange lights all appear in the same spot, it is hard to dismiss. What do you think made that sound at 1:14? M.K. Davis is a longtime Bigfoot researcher known for studying audio and video footage from remote wilderness locations. In this video, he plays back a series of vocalizations he recorded during one of those session sounds he believes may not match any known wildlife.
Now let's listen to the audio portion, greatly amplified, so that we could listen and hear some of the fainter words or expressions.
The sounds included unusual tones and patterns that he found hard to connect to common animals. He amplified parts of the audio to make the quieter elements easier to hear and explained what he was hearing. He did not make definite claims. He presented the footage and audio as material worth looking at, leaving the interpretation open. Some of the behaviors captured, moving backward into light, interacting with objects, possibly detecting infrared, do not fit typical wildlife patterns. What do you think was on that footage? A group of explorers went into the woods at night with only cameras and lights. At some point during the walk, one member stopped and aimed his light at the ground. What he found made the entire group stop.
Somebody said that there's a guy on here saying they ain't seen prints yet.
Pressed into the soft earth was a large footprint clearly bigger than any human foot in the group. Looking closer, they found two prints side by side, along with what appeared to be a large handprint nearby. The position suggested something massive had crouched down in that exact spot.
What? I mean, can you put your foot beside of it?
Oh my God.
It's definitely bigger than our foot wide.
One member placed his foot beside the print for comparison. It was wider and longer by a clear margin. The group searched the area but found no explanation for what had made them or how recently. Whatever had been standing there had already moved on before they arrived. Large prints with a nearby handprint in that position are difficult to explain as a hoax or a mistake. What do you think was crouching in those woods that night? A man was hiking by himself in the woods when he came across something he did not expect. His footage was later shared online, where it gained major attention and debate. At one point on the trail, he saw a large figure among the trees. The creature was massive, covered in thick matted fur, and had a long dog-like snout. He got a brief look before backing away. Some people pointed to known animals, while others raised the possibility of something more difficult to explain. A large fur-covered figure with a dog-like snout doesn't match any common wildlife description. What do you think he saw out there? Westrimmer shares a collection of strange nighttime sounds that were sent to him by a listener. Before moving into the full discussion and breakdown of the audio, he plays a short clip first so viewers can hear the disturbing sounds and see the location where they were recorded. The listener explains that during the spring and summer of 2019, they began hearing an unusual noise coming from their backyard late at night. It usually started around 1 a.m. and continued until 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. They never found out what was making it. The audio is brief, but the time, location, and repeated pattern make it difficult to ignore. Was it just a normal animal in the dark, or something they could never clearly identify? Although video clips now lead most modern Sasquatch discussions, footprints were the first type of evidence that helped bring Bigfoot into public attention. The Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization recently shared a plaster cast that puts that older form of evidence back in focus. During field research, members of the team found a large human-like footprint pressed into the dirt, and they made a cast of it at the site. The toes spread nearly 7 inches across, while the heel narrowed to about 5.5 inches. The full print measured around 13 to 14 inches long, but the width is the detail that stands out the most. Some people may have feet that long, but very few have feet that wide. The investigator recording the discovery placed objects beside the print to show its true size. Once the cast hardened, he carefully worked it out of the ground with a knife and lifted it toward the camera. Even with dirt still attached to the bottom, the shape of a foot was clearly visible, including what appeared to be dermal ridges. Those small skin-like patterns matter because they are very difficult to fake, especially far from town where someone would need to plan the hoax carefully in advance. Footprint evidence like this has been reported for centuries. Indigenous groups across North America have long described huge human-like tracks found in mud snow and along riverbanks. The modern Sasquatch story gained major attention in the 1950s when logging road crews in the Pacific Northwest began discovering enormous tracks around their heavy equipment overnight. Workers would return to job sites and find prints pressed into the ground after they had left for the night. Those reports helped give Bigfoot its modern name, Big Feet, Big Tracks, and a larger mystery. The cast is now kept in the organization's archive as a physical object. It is not only a blurry image or a compressed video file. It can be measured, examined, and handled. It holds the shape of something that moved through the Rocky Mountains and left a mark behind it, the soil. As more clips and older evidence continue to appear, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Maybe this cast is only one piece of a much bigger puzzle, but if the print was real, what walked there before the team arrived? The Ontario face starts with a man walking by himself through a snow-covered forest in Ontario, Canada. The cold carried the heavy stillness of deep Canadian winter. The forest was so quiet that every step through the powder seemed louder than it should have been. Old-growth trees stood close together, their branches bent under weeks of snow. Thin gray light passed through the woods. There was no wind, no birds, and no sound except his movement. He had been walking for some time, focused mostly on the ground under him, when he noticed movement where nothing should have moved. Behind a fallen tree covered in snow, a figure was crouched low and partly concealed. But it was not only hiding, it was watching him. Its eyes seemed to find him before he fully understood what he was seeing. He did not run or yell. Instead, he raised his camera with unsteady hands and started recording. The footage is rushed and shaky. His breathing can be heard, and the frame shifts with every step. Still, the camera captures the creature's face more than once. When investigators slowed the video and studied it frame by frame, the details became deeply disturbing. The skin appears dark gray and leathery like old weathered hide. Long hair falls from the top of its head, but it does not look like the tangled fur often described in Sasquatch reports. Its brow is heavy and pushed forward while the nose is small, and the mouth is thin. The face does not look like the broad, flat, ape-like face many people expect. It seems closer to something older and more human. The eyes are what many viewers focus on the most. They appear aware, steady, and almost calculating. Skeptics quickly questioned the clip after it was uploaded. Some said the snowy setting looked staged. Supporters disagreed. They argued that no common costume could easily create that mix of dry skin texture, flowing hair, and a brow that strong without falling apart once the head turned. The skin especially became a major point of debate. It does not look shiny like costume latex. It looks dry-aged and naturally wrinkled. Eventually, the recording ends suddenly with the figure still motionless in the snow. The forest remains quiet, and the face is still visible between the trees. Maybe it was a trick of light, a costume, or something much harder to explain. But if it was only hiding, why did it seem so calm while being watched? That's it for tonight. Which moment creep? Drop it in the comments. Have your own story, share it with us, and stay tuned. The next one is even darker.